everybody, this is Melody Snowflake. Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be talking a little bit about anxiety, which is something I struggle with. So just a few basic things. Anxiety is a mental health condition, and it comes in many different forms. There are different kinds of anxiety disorders. There is general anxiety, social anxiety. There is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which actually is a form of anxiety disorder. Even PTSD can be classified under an anxiety disorder, and there are a lot more. But I'll be focusing mainly on the general side of things, which is what I think I might have. I have been diagnosed with anxiety. The doctor didn't exactly specify what type, but I know I have an anxiety disorder, and I'll just be talking a little bit about my experience with it in general. Just a little disclaimer, I'm not an expert, but I'm just here to share my experience and just talk about what I know, and just, I guess, share a little bit about what it's like. So I actually had anxiety earlier before filming this video. I had like I guess you could say an anxiety attack. It wasn't bad. I just had this sudden feeling of, in a way, panic and worry. So a lot of people think anxiety is just being scared all the time. That's not exactly true. It's more complicated than that. Anxiety has a lot of different factors to it. For me, it's mostly about overthinking, dreading worst case scenarios, thinking worst case scenarios are gonna happen, being convinced that people don't like you, or in my case don't like me, stuff like that. So basically a lot of doubts, a lot of you get lots of moments when you're convinced something's gonna happen, whether in the future or if something's already happening now and you don't know about it, and that uncertainty is what usually causes the anxiousness. Anxiety also has a bunch of physical symptoms. It differs from person to person, but for me, I tend to get, you know how when you're nervous you get butterflies in your stomach? Like you start feeling like really, you know, like just you feel tense there. It's like that, but just imagine that tenfold. It gets so bad that sometimes it can affect appetite, and if it gets bad enough, other physical symptoms start to show. You can also feel your heart racing when these things happen, so you can tell like your heart rate has increased because you're getting nervous or anxious. I like to call it anxious, because it's not really fear. It is kind of fear, but it's mostly, I call it anxious. So when you get anxious, that happens. If it gets really bad, I start getting a headache, or I start getting like tension among the shoulders. And yeah, but even if you don't have these physical symptoms, you do still have a lot of things going on in your head, so it's like a constant battle with yourself. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that the physical symptoms can be exhausting, because your body is basically going on overdrive, and it can be physically exhausting to have anxiety, because you're just like, you know, your body is like reacting so strongly to this that you can't relax physically. So it's actually really tiring. On the emotional and mental side of things, your emotions tend to overreact. So along with all these physical symptoms, you start to get really anxious or overly nervous or worry about something, and it just fuels the physical symptoms and vice versa. So it's a back and forth thing until it escalates. It differs in severity from day to day, from situation to situation. and from every instance. Sometimes it's bearable, you can just ignore it, but sometimes it gets so bad that you want to just stop whatever you're doing. You actually feel physically and emotionally ill. You want to just take a break. You just want to lie in bed, do nothing until you feel better. And on those days, it's really hard, because if I have to go to school or something, it's really difficult to be like, hey, I don't feel well, I want to go home. No one would actually listen to that, because they are usually like, oh, do you have a cold? No? Yeah, you're fine. It's really hard to explain, because it's almost as bad as having a cold, if not worse at times, but not many people realize how bad it can feel. So it's a little difficult, because you have to deal with day-to-day life while coping with it. And the worst types are actually when you overthink, because say a situation happens and there are these possible worst outcomes. In your mind, those aren't possible worst outcomes, keyword being possible. They are going to happen. You're convinced that they are going to happen. Your brain runs scenario after scenario over and over again, and you try and push them back, but if you try and push it back, you feel like you're denying the truth of what's in front of you, which only makes you worry more. So you tend to just let it flow, but that doesn't actually make you not worry, because that's the whole reason you're worried in the first place. So it does that to you, and you start overthinking, and it convinces you that something bad is going to happen. Sometimes it's just out of nowhere. Sometimes your brain takes a random thing that's going on now that's not as like major as you would eventually come to believe it is, and it would magnify it. It will blow it up to like big proportions, so it seems huge. It seems like something you have to pay attention to right now. If not, you're in danger. If not, something's gonna happen to you. Sometimes it's out of nowhere, but sometimes there's a trigger, and I'll be talking about those in a future video. But a trigger is basically when something happens that you are sensitive about, or that you tend to that tends to I guess trigger a certain response in you, something that that bothers you, but to an extreme that your brain can take that and magnify it. And because it's already something that you are naturally already bothered about, not comfortable with, or it's already something that you've been worried about subconsciously for a while, your brain takes that and it becomes some of the worst anxieties you'll ever experience. Triggers are the worst, because they remind you of negative experiences, and they also remind you of, it makes you overthink, because you start wondering what if like the same thing happens again. I'll be going into more detail about that in another video, but that is basically the basics of my experience with anxiety. It's different for everybody, and my experience is not what it's going to be like for, let's say, another person with anxiety. So if you have a friend, or if you yourself are going through anxiety and you're thinking, this is not what it's like, then yeah, I completely understand, because it's different for everybody. But that's just my experience, and it can be hard living with anxiety, especially when it's something you don't realize you're going through for a while. And I'll be sharing my whole story about it in another video as well. But basically, it's something that's not easy to spot, because worry is normal. Everyone experiences fear. But having an anxiety disorder is a whole other level. But you're not scared all the time. It's just you get these moments of intense anxiety. And other moments, there are moments when you can almost feel normal, almost. And if you're lucky, there are good days when you just don't have any anxiety. but that will be another topic on its own. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if I'm a little awkward. I've never made a video like this before, and it's not easy to explain all of this, I guess, but if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening and for watching. I really appreciate it. It means a lot that someone is willing to listen to me talk about this, and I hope to see you guys in my future videos. Goodbye!